It has been confirmed that Cortez Kennedy has passed away at the age of 48 in Orlando. Family going down to be with him, and what a tragic loss of a guy that was so good both on the field and off. And I go back with him. I still remember it was 1990. I went down, was at a bowl game that he was at, spent a little bit of time with him, interviewing him because I kind of felt that he was going to be the guy. And then of course saw him at the combine, and he was always such a friendly guy. A guy that went to junior college, had great success, was going to be a guy that really started to kind of get the game back into being a 4-3, because he was that ultimate guy that you want as a three technique. And then to watch what he did in 1992 when he was the defensive player of the year on a team that was terrible, a team that could not score any points. He was just remarkable. But, I loved the way he played, but I think I liked him better as a person because of how friendly he was.
John, just hearing you talk about that, and I know that comes across a lot, right? Folks say, oh, you know what, he was a great player, but how he was off the field. And so, there's a lot of times we say that, and, you mean it a lot of times, and especially in this situation. But, John, this Cortez Kennedy, this daggered me. And I wasn't living here, John, and I didn't get the privilege of being around him as a player when he was here. Of course, I heard about Cortez Kennedy before I moved here to Seattle, and then, of course, being around the facility, both in Kirkland and the one here in Renton at the VMAC, being able to have the chance to be around Cortez he was such a nice guy. And John, I got to be honest, sometimes when I would have conversation with him, I'd almost think, you were mean on the field at one point? I would kind of think that to myself, because he was just so nice and always asking, how my day was, how many cars have you cleaned today, and it's just good. He had a little bit of a southern accent, John, and he was just so cool and how he did things. He just kind of moved around. And a lot of times, one of my favorite things that I would do, and for some reason my brain has been just going crazy, is that one of his great friends over at the facility is the equipment manager, Eric Kennedy. And Eric Kennedy, of course, has been with the Seahawks for so long. And Cortez Kennedy is his favorite Seahawk player ever. Actually, his best friend, along with Walter Jones and, of course, Steve Hutchinson. Those are some of his favorite folks ever in life. And a lot of times, whenever I would come in to bring some keys in, John, and I would see Cortez, and I'd see Cortez in EK's office, I would always make a reason to go in there because I knew the stories were going to be so good. And Cortez would just sit there in that on the couch, same spot. And in EK's office, of course, there's Cortez's jersey from him being a Pro Bowler back in the day and everything like that. I mean, he loved Cortez, and he has that on his wall right there. Anyways, Cortez would just sit right there on that couch, and they would just tell stories upon stories upon stories. And, you just kind of find a reason to just kind of stick around and, I don't have to go leave real quick. And I'd find myself sitting there, John, for 30 and 45 minutes just listening to stories. And, John, I'm quite sure at some of your times that you've got a chance to, interview him personally, interview him at press conferences and things like that. John, if you could think of some other things that kind of stand out to you from times that you interviewed him in the past, I would love to hear some of those stories, John.
Well, the one thing that was so fun is that we had such a great dialogue because I would always go over to him and say, "Big dog, how you doing, big dog?" And he'd say, "Big dog, how you doing?" And so we would big dog each other. And then, when he does that, he gives that little kind of a cackle, kind of a laugh. Hey, big dog. And so, but he would do it with such energy. And now, as an interview, he wasn't the greatest. He wasn't going to give you a lot. I mean, he'd give you, here's a guy that may not give you the greatest quotes, but, he'd give you the shirt off his back. He'd give you his wallet. I mean, he was such a generous guy as far as just being such a great person. But it was always fun because, you see him, he goes, "Big dog, how you doing?" It's like we go back and forth like that. And, what was also so great is that you look at that body of his, right? Because it wasn't the perfect body. Because first, as a defensive tackle, he was short. What was he, 6'1"? But because of the fact that he was so powerful and was able to get underneath blockers and get the play. To go through the career that he had, and that's what one of the pleasures that I had in really taking, what, 5 years or so to, as a voter in the Hall of Fame, to keep pushing him and getting him to a position where finally he was able to get where he was deserving to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And one of the things, it's tough to do because in some ways he helped a lot of other players like Andre Tippett and that, because when pushing Cortez Kennedy, as great as he was and as dominant as he was playing on teams that didn't win. I mean, he had to wait till almost the end of his career just to get one playoff game. And it's hard sometimes to sell because you talk about difference makers. Well, difference makers usually put you into the Super Bowl, put you into deep into playoffs. Well, this franchise wasn't there. It was having ownership problems with bearings. They had all these different issues, and they were trying to build things up. But Cortez played, I mean, if he were on the New England Patriots of now, I mean, you'd be talking to him the same way as Tom Brady because he'd be so dominant. He was kind of lost in the shuffle, but fortunately he got into the Hall of Fame, and it was so deserving.
10 years he played for the Seahawks, John.
Yeah.
10 years, and 8 of those 10 he was Pro Bowl. I mean, that's the kind of player that he was. And again, being able to, like I said, seeing him around recently, around the facility. And, when he comes around, and even when Walter Jones comes around and everything, they don't act like the quote-unquote Hall of Famer. And if there's one thing that I think that the takeaway that I have, that every Hall of Fame player that I ever met so far, this is just for me, and of course you've met way more than me, but for me, they always seem to be just so nice and genuine. And you almost think, man, were you that tough and ferocious on the football field? But no, man, you can just see the character, and then you could see that because they were so nice, the character that they had, that went into their hard work and what made them the player that they were on the field. And I can still remember just being at the facility, and one of the things that Cortez loved to do was ride around in that golf cart. Man, that was one of his things as well too. So man, I'm gonna miss that big fella. I mean, again, I wish that I was around here to watch him play, but just seeing his smile around the facility, seeing how calm and cool that he was, and like you said, John, he used to say to you, "Big dog." That's pretty cool, man.
Oh yeah, and I know how proud he was to go into the Hall of Fame. But you bring up the idea of good guys, right? Well, how about the Hall of Famers that the Seahawks have had? Steve Largent, can you find a better guy than him? Warren Moon, a better guy than him? Walter Jones. I mean, Walter Jones in some ways a little different personality than Tez, but almost in the same vein because they were great, but they were also humble. And, you won't see Walter Jones or Cortez Kennedy bragging about anything that they do, but they did it so well. And so Cortez Kennedy is going to be so missed. And, I'm going to miss that time because, he'll always show up at training camp. He'll always show up 1 or 2 times during the regular season. And what I'm going to miss is Big Dog.